Hello coders, good afternoon. It is, or it will be, May the 5th. So this is another pre-recorded show because on Friday, I am traveling to see a client. It's going to take a bit of time, probably between 3 to 4 hours. So I want to get an early night on Thursday. So whilst you're listening to this, I'll probably be packing my bags. Today we're going to be talking about the mono experiment, an experiment that I've been playing with recently, and I'm going to discuss what is a monorepo, then I'm going to talk about why I'm using a monorepo, and then I have some predictions on this experiment. Let's get into the changelog first. First of all, on the Monday show, which was normally a Sunday show, but because of the bank holiday Monday, I decided to do it on the Monday. On Twitch, what we did is we covered lessons 6, 7, and 8 of the PHP logging course. And I was going over the documentation for those lessons, and I did find a bunch of stuff that I needed to change and alter. So I'm really glad that we're doing this refinement phase where we're just sort of going into the weeds of it a bit and sort of altering the documentation to tailor to the course. So I'm planning to finish this course. There's 10 lessons, so 9 and 10, they're the last tutorials to do. I'm planning to do those on Twitch in another Sunday stream. Not this Sunday because, like I said, I'm traveling and I'll be traveling back on Saturday. So I would like to spend some family time on Sunday, so there won't be a stream this weekend. On Tuesday's YouTube live stream, we applied some scaffolding, built some scaffolding around the next course, which is the PHP registration course, and that has a bunch of PDO behind it because there is a database. So I was building the scaffolding, the PHP architecture for that, or starting to at least. And the course is becoming more complex as the weeks go on, as it was to be predicted. So we might be adding some more lessons in to cover the various different aspects. I'm slowly building sort of a little framework in PHP for users to register and log in and change their profile bits and pieces. But the framework, all built in OOP, of course, is sort of tailored around accessing and managing data in a database. So this is fun. This is the second week on it. So yeah, that's good. Like I said, this is another pre-recorded show, and I'll try and get back to doing my live shows next week. I say this is a pre-recorded show. I'm going to try and do this in one take. So you'll probably hear a bunch of ums and ahs as you usually do, and pauses. But there won't be a chat, unfortunately. Okay, let's talk about the monorepo then. What is a monorepo? I guess that's the first thing to talk about. So the monorepo, it is essentially a single repo, mono being one. So it is a single repository where all of your code lives. All of your code for all of your things. So Google is a good example here. Google has a single code repository for all of their code. That is mind-boggling to think about, thinking all about the different services that Google have. That is all in one single code repository. That is bonkers. And there is a talk that I'll put in the show notes where one of the Google techies were talking about how they do this and why, and the challenges that they're facing or they face and overcome. Now, obviously, that is on a massive different scale to where I am with How to Code Well. And like I said, this is all How to Code Well platformy stuff. So yes, you have a single place where your code lives for all of the things within your platform that you're building. This means that all the users of the repository have access to those particular code things, right? So you could have someone on a particular team, they would also have access to other code that isn't related to their team, unless you are like Google and they probably have written their own source control system, probably, knowing them. But I believe that they all have access to all the things, which is pretty awesome. And also, and scary at the same time, if you think of the amount of Google employees, engineers that they have, if they, having the ability to essentially alter code in all the various different places. That is why you have very strict measures in place for code reviews, pipelines, and the code that you build on your local machine has to go through various different auditing, checks, and review before it even touches the light of day. Again, this is a very bad comparison because I'm comparing Google to How to Code Well, but it is like the most extreme case of having all of your code in a single code repository. So that's it. So a monorepo is a single code repository. So why am I doing this? Well, it's an experiment, as I mentioned. This has never been done before. I've never, ever used a monorepo before. So there is that little thing that is, an itch that I want to scratch. But also, as How to Code Well, the platform evolves, I see a monorepo, or I see some of the potential benefits of using a monorepo. So when I say the How to Code Well platform, what on earth does that mean? This is where I'm going to start giving you some spoilers as to what might be happening in the future. But what we have right now is howtocodewell.net. That is the site with all the courses on. As you full well know, I am developing a new site to replace the current one, and that will have the ability for users to create an account, purchase paid courses or access free courses that I've got, and watch those courses on that platform. That is essentially what howtocodewell.net is. We also have a podcast site, so that's at howtocodewell.fm. Now, that is a site for the podcast, so there is a page per episode. So if you go to howtocodewell.fm / and then the number of which is the show, so in this case it will be howtocodewell.fm / 155 for episode 155, you'll just get the page for that particular episode with all the links, with all the show notes, and also the ability to play the episode. And also that site has the links to the RSS feed, as well as the other distribution methods of the podcast. So there's that too. We also have the Discord bot. So this is a Docker container. It's running Node, and it is the Discord bot. It's how you interact on our Discord with the bot. And it's also what I'm using to also interact with, say, pull requests and other things that are automated that come in through webhooks into our Discord server. The next thing that we have, or we will eventually have, I hope, and this is something I've never mentioned before, is a forum. Now, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but essentially what I'm hoping for, the goal is to have a forum where a user will be able to log into the How to Code Well platform and have access to a forum panel or board, I guess you would call it, that relates to the course that they have enrolled in, right? Which means that they can ask questions to other people who have also accessed that course. Right, so if they get stuck, or if they're on a different platform, like if it's a course and I've just done it on, say, a Linux box and they're doing it on a Windows machine, they might have questions or whatnot. I may also put announcements as well for upgrades to courses and stuff to let people know, and I would do that via the forum. Now, I don't want to get, like I said, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here as to why I'm doing this. A lot of you might be thinking, well, don't you have Discord? Shouldn't you just use that? Discord is a chat application. A forum is more about static discussion. I said static is probably not the right word, but it's something where people can go back in through the history and actually look for solutions of the problems that they've got. So also it's going to be indexed as well, which Discord isn't. Discord is kind of like it's a behind a wall chat area, I guess. Whereas this one is going to be specifically for each course. There'll be a forum board where people can add discussions and stuff and ask questions specifically for the course. And of course, there'll be multiple courses that I've got, so that people will be enrolling in different courses and have access to different boards. So there's quite a lot involved with just the forum, but there is a challenge here with the forum, is the fact that when someone logs into How to Code Well, they would also need to log in to the forum. And this is stuff that I haven't really sort of thought about or even done any R&D on, but there is a challenge that I'm going to have to address at some point. So there is also coming up a job server that I want, because in all of these things, so the podcast, the howtocodewell.net, they all have console scripts that I can SSH onto, or areas that I can SSH onto and run certain commands. What I would like to have is that to be centralized, so I log into a job server that has access to the various different things, and I don't have to jump in and out of various different boxes just to do specific things on those specific projects. I can just go into one place. So ideally, I would like to have a job server. Also, because of going back to the forum again, I would love to have this on howtocodewell.net/forum rather than a separate website. So to do that, I would need to have a gateway, because you would need to access howtocodewell.net/forum, and that will have to proxy back down to the forum Docker container. It's going to be a separate container to the actual howtocodewell.net container. So there's going to need to be a proxy, much like how we used to have with microservices. We had a proxy, a gateway, an API gateway, if you will, that proxied back to the various different microservices based on the way in which you created your request. It would know which microservice you're trying to access. Also, in the future, I would like to have a bunch of serverless functions where we're like handling project file uploads, where we're dealing with images and assets and other things. So there's a lot of stuff that I haven't even started thinking about or building, but there's stuff that I would like to do. And of course, as I mentioned with the forum and the howtocodewell.net, there's going to have to be some form of single sign-on, something where you sign into your How to Code Well accounts, and then there is the knowledge there that you've got these courses, you've enrolled in these courses, and therefore you have access to these forum discussions, and also it can find the various different forum posts that you've created and replied to, and other people have replied to you and stuff. So there's going to be some form of single login bit which deals with all of that. Again, would be behind the gateway. So it might seem like the How to Code Well platform is very small at the minute, but what I would like to have is the breathing space to make it more than it is, and to allow me to have a single place to deal with all of these challenges. So that we haven't talked about like the way in which How to Code Well has a look and feel, and I would like to follow that through to the forum, the podcast, and howtocodewell.net. So having like a theme that can be ported across those different areas, that would be awesome. There also needs to be like similar architecture in terms of infrastructure. So like infrastructure as code. So having the ability to write very sort of generic infrastructure in code that can be shared across the various different areas of the How to Code Well platform would be nice. So this is why I'm doing it. I guess what I've done is I've kind of moved into some of the positives of having How to Code Well, having a mono repo with howtocodewell.net. Also, I haven't discussed the content management system. Will hopefully eventually be in its own container outside of all the howtocodewell.net on probably a different site, on maybe a different subdomain, which only I have access to, which means that I am making this, I'm moving things apart, but keeping things together, if that makes sense. And we also have to talk about the databases, where all the database is. So the forum has a database, howtocodewell.net has a database, the podcast has a database. So there's lots of various different things, right? Does the pod? Yes, it does. It reads, yeah. So there's lots of things. There's lots of things. There's lots of things to deal with, and lots of interesting challenges coming up. So the streams, the Twitch streams in the future will be quite interesting things to play with. So if I wasn't using a monorepo, we would have separate different repositories for each one of those things. And there would be, in my opinion, a lot of duplication. And where there won't be a lot of duplication, there'll be a lot of smaller little repositories that are shared across multiple different repositories. And that can get quite challenging with, say, version constraints and stuff, where, say, the front end requires this package, which is also required by the back end. You know, it gets all very messy, very, very quickly, can get very messy, especially when I come to doing an upgrade. I would have to be very careful with how I upgrade the packages that are shared in separate repositories across the How to Code Well landscape. So predictions. Let's talk about predictions. So in my opinion, so I've never done this before. I've never created a monorepo before. Most of the things, all the things I've done from a professional sense when I go and see clients as a contractor, they all have their single project in a single repository. And in some cases, if they're like an agency where they've built many sites, like many e-com sites, they could all be running various different frameworks, but they could also cleverly have created packages that are generic in-house that are shared across those projects, which is really good, right? So, but they still have singular repositories for those singular projects, right? So I've never used a monorepo before, and I've never created one myself. So I don't know how this is going to go. This is, as I said, an experiment. We all know how experiments have gone before with How to Code Well. I had created the How to Code Well site before in a microservice architecture. That went horribly wrong. That basically ended up me admitting defeat. I overcomplicated it completely and decided to bring it down in a monolith. So before it was all separate, singular Symfony microservices with their own databases and stuff. Now I've brought the front end and the back end together, and I've merged a load of microservices together, and out of those Phoenix flames turned into what we have at the minute, which is a single Symfony site where we have the CMS and the front end all in one place, single database, everything's together, all of the various different microservices are all pushed together. So we had like services for images, like image uploads. Basically, I was trying to break all sorts of define all sorts of different boundaries, and it just got very complicated, very messy. And so I decided to bring it all together. whether we do this with a monorepo, whether in say 6 months' time I go, actually this is a bad idea, and start putting everything back into their own separate repositories, I don't know, but I'm up for the challenge. So my predictions are that development of certain things will actually get easier. So I mentioned earlier about the theming, right? The theming. So what I would like to have is a single theme for the podcast, the forum, the .NET site, which can be shared and can be compiled, once and then pushed up once. It's not a case of having to go into one thing, one site and change the color of a button, then go into another site and then change the color of that button to be the same as the button that I just changed in the previous site. It's all done in one place. That also covers things like JavaScript. So I wouldn't mind having a central JavaScript place, where certain JavaScript things are shared across the landscape. And also sharing things like the auditing tools, the build tools, so things like PHP Stan, configuring it to all run from a single configuration file. Same with PHP unit, same with PHP mess detection, linting, code sniffing, all of that. If I was to have a single set of configuration for all the things, then it would be easier to develop all the things. I'm not having to just jump from one thing to the other thing. Also, when upgrading like base images of PHP, for instance, like Docker images that have various different PHP stuff, having bringing the base image to a standard where it's a base image for all the things, that would be very, very helpful. So I think development will be easier. I'm certainly seeing things like Docker Compose being easier because all the things are in one place. I don't have a Docker Compose file specifically for the podcast and specifically for the .NET site and specifically for the forum, and then having to bring them all together. They're all in one spot. So the way I've done it at the minute, and like I said, this is all up for change, what I've done is I've essentially created a series of folders, and those folders within the repository hold the various different areas of the platform. So a folder for a forum, a folder for the web server or website, howtocodewell.net, the podcast, the Discord bot. They have sort of top level folders, and then at the root level we then have various different Docker Compose files that either run all the things together or run the separate things in isolation, because in some cases I want to run certain things in isolation, whereas in some other cases I want to bring them all together. So I mentioned about Docker files, the base images and stuff, that they can be brought, really sort of condensed down and made in a sort of a generic way, where I'm sharing a lot of this, the required bits and pieces across the areas of howtocodewell.net. So for example, last night, I created a Docker file for the forum, and I just included the base Docker file of the website, and within literally 15 minutes of me tinkering about with Docker Compose and the Docker files and stuff, the forum worked. It was brilliant. And because I'm doing it all in one place, it just makes sense. It makes things much easier. So that was good. This does bring me on to some other things that aren't so good. Oh, before we get on to the cons, I also think that stuff like infrastructure files, so Terraform, Ansible, they can also be shared. So for example, Terraform has modules that I've created, so certain modules that I've built, and Terraform and Ansible have roles that I've created. A lot of those are actually duplicated in the current set landscape. So on the podcast server, there is like the same. I'm on the podcast repository, the single podcast repository. It's running the same Ansible roles, or some of them at least, that the howtocodewell.net site is running. So, and I've literally just copied one to one. That's going to get awkward when I want to update one and change and not change the other. It's going to diverge. So what I'm already seeing is that by bringing in Ansible into a sort of a single place and having like single roles that are shared across the landscape of these things, that's going to be much, much better. So I think overall development might be easier to begin with. It might all fall through later on when I start getting into the weeds of stuff. On the flip side, I think deployment is going to get harder. And the reason being is that there is a temptation to couple things together when things shouldn't be coupled together. And also just by having everything together, it's going to be more awkward to pick out the things that you want to actually deploy and not deploy the things that you don't want to deploy. But also things like sharing stuff across all the bits and pieces. If I'm just tweaking a little thing here and I don't need it over there, then how on earth do I deploy only the things that I need to deploy? So like only the files that are required for the podcast, and not all the files that are required for the howtocodewell.net site. When I'm not deploying the howtocodewell.net site, I'm deploying the podcast. How do I work out what is the thing that I'm actually trying to deploy? So I think there's going to be a little bit of muddy ground that I have to walk through around the deployments, and also in terms of the build pipelines as well. That's going to get a bit muddy too, because what do I do? Just build everything and just suck up the fact that it's going to take ages for everything to build just to test this one little thing. So like, why do I need to build the podcast when I want to test something on howtocodewell.net? That there's no need. So I'm going to need to create some form of intelligence within the build pipeline to know what has changed, what hasn't changed, what needs to be tested, what doesn't need to be tested, and also the dependencies, the dependency trees as well. If I don't think about this before I do this, I can see all of these dependencies just being sort of, stuck together and being really, really super complicated. I was thinking the other day, maybe I should keep the vendor directories within their own projects, within their own sort of folders, and then maybe having a set of private parent vendor directories that are shared. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how it's going to work. But one part of me wants to have a single place where all of the dependencies live, and another part of me thinks that that's just going to be disastrous, and that we need to have duplicated vendor directories floating around all over the place for those specific things. I don't know. It's gonna get quite confusing, I think. But that's the fun of it. This isn't. I don't think that everything's going to be positive with the monorepo. I think there will be times where I'll be pulling my hair out, well, whatever's left of my hair, and go, I should have created this as singular. I should have kept to singular repositories. I don't know. Right now, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. But right now, I'm only in the development stage and haven't actually done any. Well, I've done a build, but I haven't done any kind of deployment stage. So that'll be an interesting thing to go. Another prediction is that I think it's going to be almost impossible, if not impossible, to open source parts of the How to Code World platform, which is something which is a bit of a shame, unless I started to use Git modules. So this kind of breaks the whole monorepo type thing, where it becomes more of a hybrid. And I need to play around with this a little bit. So what I'm saying is that at the root level of the monorepo, we would have a Git submodules file which would list open sourced How to Code Well packages that I can pull in. So this becomes more of a hybrid, and I predict that if this was to happen, like if the monorepo was a success, I predict that it would slide into a hybrid. So you have all of the private How to Code Well code in one place, and then you would have a selection of open source How to Code Well packages that are pulled in. That might work. I don't know. We need to play around with that and see. But again, like I said before, it can get messy when you've got like various different projects within your repository and they all require the same package, but at various different versions. That can get a little bit muddy, a bit dirty, a little bit confusing. So I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, so a quick reminder then that the next stream won't be on Sunday because I'm traveling, so it will be on the next Sunday after that. I'll put in the dates and stuff. I have no idea what date it is. It's in a week's time. But yeah, if you've had any experience with using monorepos, then please let me know. I'll be very interested to know if you think that what I'm doing is insane and I shouldn't even consider this anymore. I should just stick to single packages or single projects, single repositories. If you think that if this is interesting, if you've got any questions, then also let me know. Let me know on the howtocodewell.fm contact page. That's howtocodewell.fm/contact. And let me know. That'll be very, very cool. I will get this out for the normal Thursday, so Thursday the 5th. And yes, apologies for not being live once more, but hopefully next week that will all change. Happy coding, everyone. Cheers. Bye.